We live in an age where democracy is celebrated as humanity's greatest political achievement, yet we find ourselves perpetually bewildered by its outcomes. How is it that systems designed to elevate the wisest among us consistently produce leaders who seem woefully unprepared for the complexities of governance? The Stoic philosophers, particularly Marcus Aurelius, who himself wielded absolute power, understood something we've forgotten. The problem isn't with democracy itself, but with our fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. Imagine, if you will, a theater where the audience chooses the play. The crowd, hungry for entertainment, consistently selects spectacles over substance, drama over deliberation. The actors who master the art of performance, who can summon tears on cue, who can make their voice boom across the amphitheater, these are the ones who capture hearts and votes. Meanwhile, the thoughtful playwright sits in the corner, his nuanced scripts gathering dust because they demand patience and reflection from an audience that craves immediate gratification. This is not a failure of democracy, but a mirror reflecting our collective character back at us. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that we must waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Yet, in our democratic societies, we spend endless energy debating what good leadership looks like while consistently rewarding its opposite. We elevate those who tell us what we want to hear rather than what we need to know. The Stoics understood that most human suffering stems from our attachment to things beyond our control. In the political realm, we've become attached to the illusion that democracy will automatically produce wise governance. We've forgotten that democracy is merely a tool and, like any tool, its effectiveness depends entirely on the wisdom and virtue of those wielding it. A hammer in the hands of a master carpenter creates beauty. In the hands of a child, it creates destruction. Consider how we evaluate political candidates. Do we measure their capacity for rational decision-making under pressure? Their ability to weigh competing interests with impartiality? Their commitment to long-term thinking over short-term gains? Rarely. Instead, we're drawn to charisma, to promises that sound too good to be true, to leaders who mirror our own biases and fears back to us in amplified form. The ancient Stoics would not be surprised by this pattern. Epictetus taught that most people live their entire lives without examining their own thoughts and motivations. If we cannot govern ourselves with wisdom and virtue, how can we possibly select others to govern us? We project our own unexamined desires onto our leaders, then wonder why they fail to transcend the very limitations we ourselves refuse to acknowledge. The uncomfortable truth is that incompetent leaders are not an aberration in democratic systems, they are often its most predictable outcome. When a society values appearance over substance, promises over principles, and emotional appeal over rational discourse, it will inevitably elevate those who excel at providing these things. The competent leader, focused on the difficult work of actual governance, often appears boring by comparison to the showman who promises simple solutions to complex problems. This creates what the Stoics would recognize as a vicious cycle. Poor leadership produces poor outcomes, which frustrates the citizenry, which makes them even more susceptible to the next charismatic figure promising to fix everything. Each disappointment makes us more desperate, and desperation is the enemy of wise choice-making. The deeper we examine this democratic paradox, the more we encounter what Seneca called the poverty of time, our inability to think beyond the immediate moment. Modern democracy has become a marketplace of instant solutions, where politicians compete not on the merit of their long-term vision, but on their ability to promise immediate relief from whatever discomfort currently occupies the public mind. Think of the last time you made a poor decision, when you were hungry, tired, or stressed. Your rational mind knew better, but your immediate needs overwhelmed your capacity for wise judgment. Now, multiply this by millions of voters, each carrying their own anxieties, frustrations, and unmet desires into the voting booth. The Stoics understood that wisdom requires emotional equilibrium, yet our democratic processes are designed to capitalize on the very emotional states that make wisdom impossible. This is why populist leaders succeed so consistently. They don't offer governance, they offer catharsis. They provide an outlet for rage, a target for blame, a promise that complex problems have simple causes, and therefore simple solutions. The competent leader who explains that meaningful change requires sacrifice, patience, and nuanced thinking is immediately at a disadvantage. They're asking voters to do what most people find nearly impossible: choose long-term benefit over short-term comfort. Marcus Aurelius, governing an empire, understood that true leadership often means making unpopular decisions for the greater good. "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee," he wrote. Yet, democratic leaders face a fundamental contradiction. They must win popularity contests to gain the power necessary to make unpopular but beneficial decisions. The system rewards those who tell people what they want to hear, not those prepared to do what needs to be done. Consider how we consume political information today. We gravitate towards sources that confirm our existing beliefs, creating what the Stoics would recognize as a kind of voluntary ignorance. Epictetus taught that wisdom begins with acknowledging what we don't know. Yet our media landscape is designed to make us feel informed while keeping us ignorant. We mistake the accumulation of opinions for the acquisition of understanding. This creates fertile ground for what I call competence theater, the performance of leadership without its substance. The incompetent leader learns quickly that governing effectively is difficult and often thankless, while appearing to govern effectively is relatively simple and immediately rewarding. Why struggle with the complex realities of economic policy when you can blame your predecessors? Why grapple with nuanced international relations when you can reduce them to simple narratives of good versus evil? The tragedy is that we, the voters, are complicit in this theater. We reward the performance because it makes us feel better about our own lack of engagement with difficult realities. The leader who admits uncertainty makes us uncomfortable because it forces us to confront our own uncertainty. The leader who promises certainty, even false certainty, allows us to remain passive consumers of governance rather than active participants in the difficult work of citizenship. The Stoics taught that external events, including the actions of our leaders, are ultimately beyond our control. What we can control is our response to these events, including how we prepare ourselves to make better choices. Yet we've built a democratic culture that actively discourages the kind of self-examination and emotional discipline that would make us better choosers of leaders. We live in what Seneca might have called the democracy of distraction systems that keep us perpetually focused on the urgent rather than the important, the immediate rather than the lasting, the emotional rather than the rational. In such an environment, the leader who can most effectively manipulate our distractions will consistently defeat the one who asks us to overcome them. This brings us to an uncomfortable realization. Perhaps the problem isn't that democracy produces incompetent leaders, but that we've created a form of democracy that makes competent leadership nearly impossible to achieve or sustain. Having diagnosed the disease, we must now consider the cure, though. Like any Stoic remedy, it begins not with changing others, but with transforming ourselves. The path forward requires us to abandon the comfortable fiction that better leaders will somehow emerge from unchanged systems operated by unchanged people. Instead, we must embrace what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of desire, learning to want what is actually good for us, rather than what merely feels good in the moment. The Stoic approach to democratic participation starts with a radical shift in perspective. Instead of viewing ourselves as consumers of political promises, we must become what Epictetus would call students of citizenship, people who understand that democracy's health depends entirely on the character of its participants. This means developing the capacity to evaluate leaders not by how they make us feel, but by how well they demonstrate the cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Imagine approaching the next election with genuine Stoic detachment. You would no longer be swayed by charisma or promises that appeal to your immediate desires. Instead, you would ask, does this candidate demonstrate practical wisdom in their past decisions? Do they show justice in how they treat those who cannot benefit them? Do they exhibit courage in taking unpopular but necessary positions? Do they practice temperance in their use of power and resources? This kind of evaluation requires something our current democratic culture actively discourages: patient observation and emotional discipline. The Stoic voter doesn't make decisions based on anger, fear, or hope, but on careful assessment of character revealed over time. They understand that leadership is not about inspiring feelings, but about making good decisions under pressure. But here's where the Stoic perspective becomes truly revolutionary. It suggests that our focus on choosing better leaders is itself a distraction from the more important work of becoming better citizens. Seneca wrote that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Perhaps the end of our illusions about democracy's automatic beneficence is the beginning of something more valuable or own. Transformation into people worthy of good governance. The Stoics understood that we cannot control outcomes, only our contributions to them. In the democratic context, this means we cannot guarantee wise leadership, but we can guarantee wise participation. We can cultivate the intellectual humility to admit when we don't understand complex issues. We can develop the emotional discipline to support difficult but necessary policies. We can practice the moral courage to hold our preferred leaders to the same standards we demand of our opponents. Most importantly, we can stop expecting democracy to solve problems that can only be solved by individual character development. The incompetent leader is often just a mirror, reflecting our own incompetence as citizens. They rise to power because we reward what we ourselves value: quick fixes, simple answers, the comfortable confirmation of our existing biases. The ultimate Stoic insight is that good governance begins with self-governance. A society of people who cannot manage their own emotions, delay their own gratification, or think beyond their own immediate interests will inevitably produce leaders who embody these same failings. The path to better democracy doesn't run through better politicians, it runs through better people. This doesn't mean abandoning political engagement, but transforming it. Instead of seeking leaders who promise to make us happy, we should seek those who challenge us to be better. Instead of demanding solutions that require no sacrifice from us, we should support policies that ask something of us. Instead of treating democracy as entertainment, we should approach it as what it actually is: a sacred responsibility requiring our highest virtues. The irony is profound and perfect. In a system designed to serve the people must first learn to serve something higher than their immediate desires. Only when we stop electing leaders who tell us what we want to hear will we start getting leaders capable of helping us become who we need to be. The transformation of democracy begins not in the halls of power, but in the quiet moments when each of us chooses wisdom over comfort, character over convenience, and the long-term flourishing of our communities over the short-term satisfaction of our desires. In the end, we get exactly the leaders we deserve. And that, perhaps, is democracy's greatest teaching.